Well, hello. I'm Chuck Gregory, host of the New American Dream radio show that's on Revolution Radio, and I'm going to read a story titled Reflections by Amadpainter. Physicist Jeffrey Burley carefully put down his guitar. It was his baby, never really wanting to put it down. He so loved to play. It was a 57 Les Paul Custom, mahogany, painted ebony. But he had work to do. At least the work was at home today, and he could stay in his pajamas and robe. He took a sip of his coffee. It was cold. He went into the kitchen, filled it up before going down to the basement lab. For the past year, he'd been trying to find a way to reproduce a magnetic field that he'd come across a little over a year ago. This field was on a wood frame around a mirror. He believed that the mirror had come down from another galaxy over a magnetic bridge. He never really cared why it was here, but he did know that it was how his friend had disappeared. He knew that Colonel Michael Hamilton III was not the kind of guy to just step into another galaxy without backup. Now, his secretary, Tina Bellamy, that had been a really big mistake. She'd fallen through because she tripped rushing to see Hamilton in the mirror. The mirror had broken, and the bridge was closed. It had been a total disaster. He'd been called there to help find him by the then Major Steve Johnston, who was also a friend. He had met Steve when doing an experiment with time travel. Steve was a volunteer test subject there. Not too long after, Steve had married his secretary, Susie. He liked them both. He had given the mirror in the hope that he could figure out how to make it work again, maybe even make his own bridge. He'd spent almost every weekend and days off working at doing just that. He was not having much luck at it, but he was learning. He was no longer working on time travel, having proven that it was possible, but he found it was not so good for human use. It caused the body to age years and hours. Maybe someday they'll find a way to make it safe, but he was not too sure of that. 6 months ago, he'd started to study dimensional shifting for use in space travel. Most all other physicists would laugh at his ideas, but like time travel, he knew the answers were out there somewhere. He just had to find them. He'd noticed that both dimensional shifting and the mirror bridge had to do with magnetic fields. One needed a super powerful one, the other needed a super weak one. He'd decided to take the glass out of the frame and send it off to be analyzed. He was not surprised. The test said the silicon was of a type that was rare on Earth. The back was coated with 95% pure silver, 5% gold. Steve's business, Amalgamated Consulting Organization, was footing the bills, and he was told that funding was unlimited, so he ordered a replacement made. It would be there in the morning by 9 a.m. He thought he really should call Steve. He may want to be there when he put the glass in. He looked at the huge clock that he'd hung on the block wall behind the desk. He thought it too early to call him. It was only 8:15. He set his coffee down on the desk, went to the workbenches where the frame was, leaning on the wall. He'd wired it up good. There were a good 5 different computers, a couple of sets of meters. He looked at each, was not impressed. They said the same thing every day. Well, this alone he thought strange. He'd thought the field would have collapsed by now. The glass itself holds no magnetic field that he was able to detect. Yet the reflection in it was a little out of focus. May have been because of what the back coating was. He just didn't know. At 10, he picked up the phone and called Steve's office. It only rang one time, and he heard, "Amalgamated Consulting Organization. I'm Jenny. How may I help you?" "Well, Jenny, you can quit your job and marry me." "Oh, Doc, you know I can't marry you. Steve needs me." He always made her smile. "Hey, he married my secretary. He took her away from me, too." He'd gone to work for ACO when the president had promoted Steve to colonel. He was sure that the ACO was not a consulting company of any kind. He'd known Hamilton for years, and it was always Air Force funding. Hamilton kept coming back to see what he'd come up with. He liked the fact that he could talk Hamilton into funding some of his crazy ideas, but, well, many did pay off in the end. Well, I like you too much to marry you. After all, you most likely won't live through the honeymoon. I believe you, he said. Is Steve available? Sorry, he's gone till the morning, some secret getaway that Susie set up. Oh, okay, thanks. Tell him I need a call back when he gets in. I have some news about the mirror he may want to hear. Will do. Now, don't you go and jump to another galaxy, because I said, no, there's many more women in this one. He laughed. I'm staying in this one, thank you. Have a good day, my lady. He liked her. She'd gone out of her way to help Steve take full control of whatever the ACO was. He was pretty sure it was part of a secret Air Force program, but he was not going to tell anyone anything. Steve was the one that would be giving him funding from now on. Well, he had nothing that he needed to deal with in the lab till the mirror got there, so he decided he could go back and play a few tunes before he had lunch. It was good that he lived in the country. He was not sure if any of the neighbors would like his eclectic taste in music or how he liked to crank it up when he played. His housekeeper had a 3-day weekend off so she could visit with her sister who was in town. Lunch had been made for him and was in the refrigerator. Dinner he'd have to cook himself. He had no problem with that. He loved to cook. When he looked up again, 2 hours had passed. He'd forgotten about his lunch. Ah, well, he thought, no big deal. He'd have it tomorrow. When he played, he thought, and a lot of times he would see the answers to many of his thoughts, or new questions would find their way into his mind. He thought about the mirror and how it opened up a portal to another galaxy. Or was it really another one? Could be opening into another dimension for all he knew. He just assumed it was a galaxy because of the magnetic field was the same as the bridges. It was 1/1,000,000th out of Earth's. It was the wood frame, not the glass, that was. And he was unable to figure out how it could happen. He thought that he should know, but was just not focusing in his mind. When an answer came to this point, he knew it would not be long before it would pop into his brain, and he wouldn't believe that he didn't see it already. That's the way all of his good answers came. Ever at night he would wake up when it happened and would have to go to work. If there was any way to save Hamilton and his secretary Tina Bellamy, he was going to be the one to do it. He'd not been there when Hamilton had gone in or was dragged in, but it was his fault Tina was gone. He should have never opened the bridge up again there. It should have been done in a lab of some kind. The biggest part was he had no clue how he did it or if he did it. He'd never told Steve, who just thought that it was working and then it was broke. He woke up ready for the mirror to be there. He was excited. He'd taken them over 2 months to make it. He understood why. The type of silicon was rare. It took 4 days to cool. The backing coat was a custom mix that had to be made. He made coffee and decided to go sit on the porch. It was a fine morning out, he thought. He loved living near Marin, Switzerland. He'd worked at CERN for over 5 years, had the house floor now. He had a good-sized lab, most of the equipment he needed. He really could do most of his work there, but big work had to be at CERN, where he had a whole team to help. He went in to fill his coffee when the phone rang. He answered it. "Burley here," he said. "Hey, Doc. Ginny said you called." It was Steve. "She said you had some news." "Hey, Steve, yes, the new mirror will be here in about an hour. Would you care to be here when I put it in the frame?" "Can you hold off till we get there?" Only if that part meant Ginny, too." Steve laughed. "And Susie. She wants to see you or ask you something." Well, I'm sure we'll have an answer. It just might not be the one she wants. Okay, we'll see you about noon. I even have a surprise for you. He laughed and hung up. That was a little strange, he thought. It was okay. He had a lot to think on, so he didn't have time to waste on the mysteries. Filled his coffee cup, went back out on the porch. The sky was now half full of clouds. May rain later, he thought. Didn't matter to him much. He'd be busy the whole day once the mirror got there. The delivery man had to carry it to the basement for him. Looked hard at all the equipment, but didn't ask anything. It came in a large wooden box. He would have to wait for Steve to get there to unpack it. He thought, well, if they'll be there around noon, I'd better make them a good lunch. He decided on a good green salad, bell peppers, onions, and tomatoes. That would make a good start. Follow it up with fried chopper sausage on yellow rice with gravy. He loved to cook for others just to see how they liked it. All three of them had gotten his cooking a few times and were always delighted. He went to work in the kitchen. Steve pushed his plate a little bit away and said, "Wow, now that was a fine lunch. I feel fat now and want a nap." He laughed. He leaned forward. I'm sure you know that the ACO is not what it shows the world it is, right? Burley looked at him, then at the ladies, then back at him. Nodded his head yes, so Steve continued. All three of us work not only for the ACO, but also for a private research named Ether. It stands for Earth, Time, Heaven, and Energy Research. Susie spoke up. "Buckle up, cowboy," she smiled. Steve continued. "Susie and I are agents for Ether." He spent the next hour telling them all about their AI assistants that they both had. Susie's was named Alex. Steve's was named Kylie. Ginny didn't have one, just being a secretary for them at the ACO. "Okay, where do I get mine?" He laughed. "Why are you now telling me this?" Susie grinned. "We want you in the inner family if you're going to be the godfather of our child." All three of them were grinning at him now. "Wow, that's great news. You two will make fine parents. And yes, I would love to be a godfather." "Well, great. Now that's settled, Ether would like you to join us." "Do I get an AI too?" "I can't tell you that unless you say yes." He smiled at him. Beryl's face went blank. They thought he was going to say no. Then he smiled and said, "Oh, about time y'all let me in on what you've been up to." "Great. From today you work for the ACO as far as anyone else, but really you're now part of Ether. And being so, you answer to no one but me. No one at the ACO knows of Ether but us four, and it's to stay that way for now. To answer your question, yes, you do get an AI assistant." He smiles. Susie, with a big smile, said, "You know what? You now get to steal Steve's secretary. Ginny's agreed to work for you now, so you don't have to marry her now in order to get your coffee." They laughed. For the next 30 minutes, they set Burley up, so when he heard the ding in his head, he knew just what it meant. "Dr. Burley? My name is Terry. I'm pleased to meet you." It was a strong female voice that he could respect. For the next 30 minutes, he didn't say anything out loud. He kind of had a look of bliss on his face. Ginny spoke up first. "Hey, you'll have hours to talk with Terry. You have guests." "I'm sorry. It's like Christmas when I was 7. He kind of giggled. "I think we have some work to do, don't we?" Ginny stayed in the kitchen to clear up while the other three went to the basement lab. Steve found a drill and began to unbox the mirror. About the time he was finished, Ginny joined him. Anyone notice there's a storm moving in? Burley nodded his head. No worry. Lab has its own generator, my dear. Within minutes, Steve and he had the mirror in the frame and back leaning on the wall. All four, and the three AIs, stared at it as if it was going to do something. Damn good reflection. Make a great selfie, Susie said. Burley was still in his pajamas and robe, but like most great minds, didn't care how he looked. If y'all would give a little room, I'll get this thing wired up. After 10 minutes and a few cuss words, he had the computers hooked back up. Hey, Doc, would a D-Wave help you out here? Steve asked him. I don't think I'll need one now, with Terry. In his head, he heard an awe from her. All the readings are the same as when I first hooked it up in Hamilton's office. Does that mean you can open it up again? Steve looked into the reflection. About that. I didn't do anything. It turned on by itself. He looked down, being a little embarrassed. There's a key. I just don't know what it is yet. Ginny spoke up. Too bad. Not like a radio with an on or off switch and a tuner. Burley's mouth fell shut. The answer hit him like a brick wall falling on him. In his head, he heard Terry say, Doctor, please, you need to relax. His heart rate was way too high, he thought. You're an angel, my dear, he said to Ginny. That's it. It needs tuning in. Not a key, well, just maybe a key, but... He laughed. They all looked at him as if he was crazy, having no clue what he was talking about. Be right back, he said. Went up the stairs. A moment later, he was back, and in his hand, he held his baby. He plugged the guitar into the mixing board with a big smile on his face. The key is sound. I should have known that all along. When I turned it back on in the office, I had music playing low in the background as I worked. He pointed at the mirror. I bet that thing can go to many different places with the right sound. Do you know what song you were playing when it came back? Steve asked. You bet I do. It's a simple tune I wrote when I was about 20. He hit a couple of notes and turned one of the keys. I'm sure the key must be just right to hit the target channel. In this case, the place that Hamilton and Tina went. Well, right now we just need it to work, Susie said. Well, of course. Now watch the reflection. He hit a note, held it as long as he could. All three of them shook their heads no. Next he hit two notes. This time they all saw a kind of ripple. Okay, I'm going to play a good piece of the tune. After the first 4 seconds, the ripple soared inward upon itself. At 10 seconds, they saw the blue fog rolling around that they saw the first time. In Steve's mind, he heard Kylie with an Aussie accent that he loved to hear. I think he hit it right on the mark. It's the same room, but it's empty now. I think you're right, he thought, just as Burley stopped playing and the mirror returned to the lab's reflection. He turned around to Burley and said, well, not that we don't like your playing, but you have that recorded somewhere, right? You know I do. I just wanted to show off, he smiled. He went to his desk, opened a drawer, held up a CD. I have everything I ever wrote. Good, put it in. Hold on a minute, Susie said. What the hell are we going to do when it's open? Just walk in? I have a small drone with a camera, Burley suggested. It's fully charged and ready to go. It's hooked into my computer and we can see what it sees. The next 10 minutes were spent getting the drone ready. Ginny made sure it would fit into the mirror. She thought it was a little close. The three AIs were talking to each other and decided to let the humans handle it. They looked to be right on so far. Either of them would have stepped through if they could. How long's the battery life? Steve asked. I'm not sure. Never run it dry before, but should last a good 3 hours. Should be plenty of time to have a look in one room. He looked at Jenny and said, I set the song to loop, so it should just keep going. When you're ready, push play. Steve gave her a thumbs up and she hit the play button. The music filled the lab. A moment later, the blue fog flowed and then began to clear up. They could see the room on the other side clearly. Looked like any room here. Burley flipped the switch and the drone came to life. He checked that the camera was working and lifted off. Slowly he moved it over in front of the mirror, checked the camera again, and moved forward. It passed through the mirror as if it was a doorway. He moved it into the room a little, then slowly began to rotate. It looked just like a room in his house, he thought. There was a mirror on the wall that the drone had passed through, almost the same as their mirror. The far wall had a window in it. Want me to go take a look? Burley asked Steve. He didn't wait. He moved it over to the window, and all of them were shocked by what they could see. The sky was a deep red. The window was high up, so it overlooked a huge area, and there was something huge standing on the plain. A lot of the area was covered with some kind of movement. It was weird. Made their minds fight to make sense of it. Okay, that's good. Bring it back, Steve told him. He took his time to bring it back. No sooner than it landed, the motor sped up and it burst into flames so intense it was a pile of dust before any of them could move. Ginny was the closest to it. Steve said to her, "Don't touch it. Might be poison." Burley slipped on a set of gloves, grabbed a glass jar, and gathered a sample of the dust. He looked up. Well, that was totally unexpected. Shut off the music, please. Susie turned it off, and the mirror's reflection returned to that of the lab. I really liked that drone. Well, it was good that we recorded it. They spent the next hour replaying the tape over and over. As they zoomed into the moving mass, they were stunned seeing that there were a lot of some kind of people or beasts moving randomly about. Some of them were carrying stuff to the large thing rising out of the plane. When Burley zoomed in as best he could upon it, they were shocked. It appeared they were building a huge mirror. Susie was the first to talk. Is it just me, or are we looking at an invasion force? I do believe so, but the question is to where, Steve said. Steve rubbed his chin. And Burley, can you find out what happened with the drone? I'm sure, but I can tell you now. When it was over there, he pointed at the mirror, its molecular structure was changed in some way. This is not a doorway to another galaxy. It's to another dimension. Steve smiled. You have no idea what that means to ether, Doc. Quantum computers are not the only way to access another dimension, he thought. Do you think you can figure out how that portal works? Should be no big deal. Now I have a working model. They spent the next week right there, each of them working on what they could do to help Burley. They'd learned a lot about why the drone had combusted into ashes, and in the long run would one day help to bring about what's called free energy. Anything that went into the other dimension would change to match that one, and if it had not fully changed before returning, it would implode. Had it stayed longer before coming back, it would have been fine, only having to match back to this dimension. So, it would be safe to pass over and come back, Steve asked. Burley nodded his head. As long as you're not in the change stage, anyone should be able to. Hamilton and Mrs. Bellamy should be fine to come back, if we can find them. That was what he really wanted, to save his friend. Steve only reported to one person, and that was the president. And he did not want to make the call. Far too many questions that needed answering, but he had little choice. It was his duty. He went to the front porch to sit. Spent an hour on the phone with him, and when he hung up, he did not look too happy. In his mind, he heard Kylie. The president is a wise man. Well, he may be wise, but he was wrong on this, he thought to himself. If you were to pass in there, I might not be able to come with you. I don't like thinking of you in there without me. Burley walked out, saw the look on Steve's face, said, "Hey, still got a job, right?" This made Steve smile a little. "It would seem I can't be fired even if I wanted to be. I must say I don't agree with him in this case." He looked at Burley. "Ether agrees with the president, so I guess I've been outvoted." Burley sat down in a chair next to Steve. The ladies were inside talking. "Well, I can't tell you where I stand on it if I don't know what he told you." Steve shook his head. "Here I show him rock-solid evidence of a force preparing to conduct an invasion. He said we had no proof as to where." "Well, I can see why he's thinking it might not be us they're about to invade, and creating a new enemy is not something we need." He said that to go after Hamilton was out of the question. He said we have no proof he's still alive, and the only thing we have proof is that there are other dimensions. He stood up, walked over to the porch railing. "The bastard shut us down. We're to stop all research. He wants the mirror boxed up, and we're ordered to keep silent about this." Burley kind of giggled. "I'm not surprised. Who would want it known that they knew there was an invasion coming and did nothing about it?" He stood, went over to Steve, and put his hand on his back. "They may have shut us down right now, but you know that what I've been working on at the big lab, dimension shift for space travel, well, my son, it would seem they're just about the same thing. Don't give up on saving Hamilton just yet." Burley would not give up on saving his friends. He didn't care if it was the president telling him to.